Hello, welcome to Carousel. I'm Barry Kesselman, your host, and we're going to hop on the carousel and do what we do every week, which is find interesting people to discuss interesting subjects and get an intelligent point of view of the matters of which we're going to talk. Today, I'm very fortunate to have with us the pastor of the St. James Missionary Baptist Church of New Britain, Connecticut, Pastor John Walker. And we are going to have an interesting half hour together chatting about various things. John is also a former policeman for New Canaan, Connecticut, and was in the military. He was a military policeman.
Yes.
And a chaplain, and we will get into some of his background as we talk. But right now, it's my pleasure to introduce you to John Walker.
Good to meet
you.
Hello,
John.
Nice to meet you.
Good to see you.
And you also.
John, how about giving us a little bit of your background so that folks have an idea of where you come from when we get into some of the subjects we're going to discuss?
I was born and raised in Stamford, Connecticut. Third child of Reverend John Walker. Educated in the Stamford public school system. Graduated with honors and went to college in Farmingdale, Long Island. From there, I went to the military as a military police officer. Came out of the military and worked for a couple of years, then was appointed to the police department in New Canaan, where I served for a number of years. There I am.
Okay, now your father was also a detective, right?
My dad was
a policeman.
Was the first black detective in the city of Stamford when he was on the force, and I followed in his footsteps being a police officer.
And you did police work, and you do your current work because you care about people, as I understand it.
I love people, and always had a sense of wanting to help. My mother and father taught us to give back, and giving back for me was helping people. And in the police department, although there are arrests, but we're there primarily to serve. And in the ministry, there's crises all the time, but still you're there to help, and we're there to serve.
Very good. You're also the founder and president of the Concerned Citizens for Equal Justice.
Right. And in June of this year, right after the Trayvon Martin verdict with George Zimmerman, a group of us decided to get together, and we formed this group because we're concerned that justice is not being applied equally for persons of color. And we want to make sure that, or at least attempt to make sure that, everybody's treated fairly and equally in the judicial system.
Now, we talked before, just on the phone, so that we would, I'd have an idea of some of the things that we could discuss right here on television.
Sure.
And we talked about some of the cases that have come before the judicial system in the last few years. And you mentioned a case about a woman who, I think, shot the ceiling in her
Well, there was a black woman in Florida, a young black woman, and her, I believe, boyfriend had been assaulting her and had been threatening her, and she shot a shot in the ceiling, and she was convicted and sentenced to 20 years. George Zimmerman, he killed a young man, a boy, 17 years old, and he was acquitted. It doesn't seem to be equal justice. Similarly, a white woman in New York City, married to a doctor, she threatened to kill the doctor's girlfriend, and she was let off with probation. In our experience, black youths, persons of color, Hispanic descent, they may have done the same thing, and they don't get probation. They don't get acquitted. They're sentenced, and they're sent to prison a long time. In our area of New Britain,
yes,
our church is located in a minority district. There's a lot of Hispanics, a lot of blacks, and there's a lot of drugs in the area. The dealers are primarily persons of color. The purchasers are people from the suburbs. And so they come into town and buy drugs, and if they're caught, they get sent for treatment. The dealer gets sent to jail. And my question has been, if drugs are illegal and drugs are bad, why are we sending the dealer to jail and the person who uses the drug to treatment? And I look at it and I say, well, the people that are selling the drugs are 16, 17-year-old black males, Hispanic males, and they get sent to jail. And the person that are buying the drugs primarily are 35-year-old white males, 40-year-old white males, and they have money and they go to treatment facilities. It doesn't seem to be equally distributed.
Oh, you've given us so much to talk about. I think that's great. Let's just focus on the last point with the drug situation. Two aspects. One is there is a difference, of course, between dealing drugs and using drugs. I mean, I would think that dealing drugs is a whole lot worse than using drugs. Forgetting penalties and forgetting
dealing drugs is bad, and we don't make light of it in any way, shape, or form. It's a whole history, though, and we need to start looking at why. Maybe because there's lack of employment or underemployment. Maybe there's lack of education, housing. So many of our youths, persons of color, they don't have access to the things that may enable them to get quality education or quality jobs or role models. And so, unfortunately, they turn to selling drugs because they need to sometimes put food on the table.
Well, that is truly interesting. Do you think that there would be such a discrepancy in the judicial treatment of users and dealers if they were both of the same color? Do you think how much of it do you think is a function of the color difference, and how much is a function of user versus dealer difference in your mind?
I think, I don't have statistics, but I think if you have a purchaser that is a person of color, Latino, black, and you have a dealer, and I think that if they're caught in similar circumstances, then they both will be penalized more heavily than if the roles were reversed, the races were reversed. And again, that goes to representation. In the judicial system, a lot of the persons who come through the system that are persons of color may not be able to afford the best lawyer. and we don't knock public defenders. We're thankful for them. But if they have 75 cases and they're getting paid state's wages, you might not get as in-depth of representation as maybe somebody who commands $400 or $500 an hour.
That's for sure. I'm going to take a little detour on that because I just heard today prisoners in Rikers Island in New York they talked about some minor drug offenses, carrying marijuana. They're arrested, they come into court, and they have the opportunity to make bail before they come up for a trial hearing or for the trial. And sometimes the bail is set as low as $500 or $1,000, and a lot of people, I think mostly of color, can't make that. And so they end up in Rikers Island as prisoners in the jail because they can't make, for months, on a crime that would have a penalty of
$50.
Or 7 days or 10 days in jail.
Sure.
And that really goes to your point about a lot of people can't afford it. Of course, that's a matter, I think, more of poverty, but we know people of color are less fortunate in the economic realm of the United States also.
And that may be true, and it goes to also education. If we look at New Britain, and we read recently their reading level is very poor in the state of Connecticut. And when you couple that with the lack of books in the classroom, the lack of iPads, the lack of computers, truancy, absenteeism, hunger, certainly you can't learn well if you're hungry. Certainly you don't do well in school if you're sharing books or copying lessons for the class.
And New Britain, just for those who don't know, is mostly a minority school district?
I would think so, yes. Yes, Hispanic, Black, yes. A lot of the children I've recently found over the years, I've been in New Britain as the pastor, they go to magnet schools in Hartford, Science and Sports Academy, because the education is going to be for the future of sciences and maths and arts. And reading and writing and arithmetic, they are very important. But if you don't have books, if you don't have iPads for today, then you're limited in what you are to.
And you're a pastor in New Britain, so you get to see a lot of this more close up than a lot of other people. And those kinds of things, it's actually astounding to me that we have school systems in cities, towns like New Britain that don't have enough books to go around. But how do we get the students in situations like that up and out? How do we get parents to be involved? You mentioned mentoring or things of that nature. How do we get
parents have to be more active? Unfortunately, it seems like because economics, two parents have to work. A lot of times in our persons of color's households, there may not be two parents there. And so you may have one parent working 2 or 3 jobs, not making quality dollars. And so there's that balance there. And you still have to be involved with the children in school. So you have to find time to do homework with the kids, or you have to find time to go to PTA meetings, know who the teachers are, know who the students are. And today it seems like there's not enough of that from parents. And we have to do a better job.
And we have to concentrate on the kids.
Right.
And bring them up and out, give them mentoring and all.
Give them mentoring, let them know that they are special, let them know that you can make it. I tell my daughter, I don't talk often about our children, but I tell my daughters every day, you're beautiful, because they need to hear that. Because if you don't tell your children that they're smart, and everybody else is telling them that they're not, then that's what they're going to receive. And so we want to empower our children, make mistakes, but understand that it's a learning opportunity and we grow from it. We don't give up.
Certainly that's true, and it would take more than the remainder of the half hour to straighten that out. But let's go to your activities in the Coalition for Equal Justice. And did that originate with the Trayvon Martin situation? Or?
It originated with the George Zimmerman verdict.
Oh, after the verdict.
After the verdict, we wanted to get together. We had a couple of rallies in New Britain, and we wanted to bring focus to the attention that we think that this verdict was unjust and unfair. We believe, and I know they didn't say race was a factor in the trial, but we truly believe that if Trayvon Martin was white, he would not have been followed in the first place. And 2, if Trayvon Martin had been the shooter, and George Zimmerman was the victim, Trayvon Martin would have been in jail.
That's very interesting and obviously very controversial, which is great. I mean, that's why we're here to discuss these things. And let's look at both those aspects. The jury obviously found acquitted Zimmerman. There's no question that he killed somebody.
Sure.
But they found that, at least under Florida law, it was self-defense.
Well, they didn't say that. They said that he was not guilty. I don't even think they brought up too much in the trial about stand your ground.
No, well, not in the
so not in as much as self-defense. But even after the verdict, one of the jurors, possibly two, said that they think they made a mistake, and they were not happy with their verdict after the fact, and I'm not sure why that's so. But our call has been to Attorney Holder, and he's a U.S. Attorney General.
Right.
We'd like him to at least appoint a special prosecutor to look into and see if Trayvon Martin's civil rights were violated. And all we're asking for is a fair assessment, a fair investigation, and see if his rights were violated.
Is there any particular evidence, either new that wasn't in the trial or that was in the trial, that leads you to believe that there was a violation of his civil rights?
Well, I'm not an attorney, and I don't have privy to all the investigative things that are out there in Florida. But that's why we're just asking Attorney Holder to appoint a special prosecutor that he might or they might look at that.
And if you're successful in that, and there is an investigation by the Attorney General under federal law, and they come to the conclusion that there's not enough under the law to bring the case, would you be satisfied at that stage?
We are law-abiding citizens, and we respect the law. And if it plays out that there were no violations under the law, then we accept that. Don't have to agree with it, but we accept it.
Of course not. Of course not. I remember the other great controversial law case, which was O.J. Simpson, kind of split the United States into showing how much we are really black and white as far as the reaction to the verdict of his case. And I remember being so disappointed that people seem to break on either side of that verdict based more on their color than anything else to a large extent.
It's unfortunate if it does break that way. You know, the whole thing should focus on equality. And we as people of color or people of minorities, we have to do a better job in our own house also. We're not just saying that we're being treated unfairly by the system. We have enough in our own backyard to take care of. Black on black crime is running rampant, and we just saw a shooting a few weeks ago of a 16-month-old baby in New York by a young black male. We just saw in New Orleans shootings, and again, we just saw in Georgia a young man was convicted of killing a baby that was in a stroller. Those were persons of color, victims of color, and so we have enough to clean our own backyard, and we want to make sure that we let people know that we have a responsibility to our own selves also. So we're not sitting here just saying, you know, the larger community is treating us unfairly. We need to police our own self.
Yes. What do you think about stop and frisk laws, which again, you mentioned there's more black on black crime. Stop and frisk, you as a police officer know better than I, is for the purpose of preventing crime.
I'm a retired police officer. I'm 7 months away from graduating with my doctorate degree
In divinity.
in ministerial work.
Yes.
I graduate, if everything goes very well, in May of 2014. And I'm a pastor. And I said to my wife a few weeks ago, I'd like to go to the Bronx, just walk around to see if I'm going to be stopped. And of course she says, John, don't do that. But I believe that although it's an investigative tool, it may be used improperly at times. You know, if I'm doing nothing but in the area of a high crime area, I still should be free to walk through it.
Right.
And somehow it seems that it has been reduced to we stop a lot of people, mostly persons of color, and they may have done nothing but just been walking down the street. And you should be able to walk down the street no matter what color you are.
The color of your skin should not be a probable cause for stop and
And
frisk.
sometimes it is. And I wanted to go down to take that experiment to just see. I didn't go, but I wanted to.
Let me disclose that I have known John's wife for a few decades. In fact, we've worked together. So, and that's how I got the benefit of having John come here today. And she gives good advice.
I still may go.
Now, what about gun control? Does that fit into any of these feelings of yours?
I think there's too many guns out there in the community. We read recently in New York City, some male shot someone on the subway, and the person he shot pulled out his own gun and shot back. You don't know where guns are today. I mean, kids, 13, 10, are carrying guns in homes where children pick up a gun at 3 or 4 years old and kill their 6-year-old brother. The Second Amendment is there, and there's a hard cry about the Second Amendment and the rights that it affords. We're not saying take away guns completely. We're saying be responsible gun owners, and a 10-year-old doesn't need to have a gun. A 5-year-old doesn't need to have access to a gun. Convicted felons don't need guns.
Yeah, I think you get unanimity on that. And now we just had this tragedy at the Naval Yard. A person killed 12 people that had a mental illness problem, apparently. And
right. We have to do a better job concerning mental illness. There are, in our day, your day, my day, we would say that person is just crazy. But in reality, some people are. And instead of making light of it, we need to give them the help they need. And maybe if the red flags that were apparently present in this young man's life, maybe it could have been avoided if he had received the help that he needed. And so oftentimes it's not taken care of until after the fact.
I want to go back in a couple of minutes, which is all we have left, to talk about what it would take to have you and your group and others like you feel that we are moving toward equality and justice for people of color. What would it take, or what needs to be done that would be satisfying?
When we, meaning persons of color, are afforded equal housing, equal medical care, equal education, equal pay for the same job that others do, then I would feel that we're moving in the right direction. We have a long way to go. I mean, the civil rights era has passed in the 60s and 70s, and we've made great strides with President Obama, different persons in the Congress, and different leaders in the community. We made great progress. Principals that are persons of color, but there's so much more to be done. And you and I spoke about my age group and the 50s, the 50-year-old persons, and that group that were in the 30-year-old and the 20-year-old They got lost in the drug culture.
Yes.
And we have to make sure that we get our babies, the 5-year-olds, the 6-year-olds, teach them how to read, teach them how to do math, teach them about science, because they truly are the generation that are going to lead the country next. And if we don't get those 5-year-olds, then I'm afraid, Barry, that we're going to lose another 20 years.
That would be truly tragic. What about the fact that we have an African-American president, an African-American attorney general, celebrities and rock stars and athletes and all, many are African-Americans. How is this helping? I assume it's helping, but is it helping young children to see role models that make them want to strive harder?
I think that the persons you named are good, but I believe it's going to take the average Joe to make the difference. You know, it's great for a child to want to be a basketball star. And you know, back in my day, I want to be like Mike. That's wonderful. But
I see you got the same hair.
Hardly none of his money. But the reality of it is, you need the working person in the neighborhood who's taking care of his family or her family and seeing them struggle, seeing them succeed. We need to emulate that person. Everybody's not going to be President Obama. Everybody's not going to be Attorney Holder. But you can be the man who gets up in the morning time and goes to work. You can be the mother or father who's there for their child. And if you can show the child that, I think you'll be more successful than showing them, I don't know, Derek Jeter.
Well, I think we need more parents like you, and perhaps like me, who really will do that and care like that and have our children feel that they have the opportunities if they get the opportunities and apply themselves better.
I know a lot of people do a lot of things,
Okay.
but we need prayer also.
Okay. John, we are done. I thank you
so very
much.
much for your time.
Okay.
I'm glad to have been here today.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.